Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti.
Good morning to everyone. Welcome. In the past, we said distant friends and close friends, and now we said friends and presence and friends who are on Zoom. So this conference on inner disarmament, I immediately give the floor to Fabio Risolo, the representative of Merigar, and then I will introduce the event. I give you the floor. Good morning to everyone. I join those in presence and those online in extending my welcome. And I would like to thank, it's important, I would like to thank the speakers that will delve into the theme that is the object of this meeting. It is the final moment, this meeting today, this meeting among us, of a project, the culmination of a project, Merigar, that is the main seat of the community in Europe. Thus, Merigar organized with Asia this event using also a generous contribution of funds of the Italian Buddhist Union, UBI. This is just a culmination of a project that has been ongoing, that certainly Andrea will tell you more about. I extend the greeting of Merigar, and I would just like to say just a couple of words regarding inner disarmament that Andrea mentioned. Certainly, all the spiritual ways, all the inner paths share this perspective. We don't need to repeat it. Namely, that external peace in the world, is a utopia until we accomplish inner peace. Inner peace, and I know that everybody shares my feeling, is linked to an inner journey, an inner quest, and to the priority fact of identifying our nature, our essential nature, entering into contact with our deep nature. When we are in touch with this inner nature, we are in peace with ourselves. And when we are in peace with ourselves, we have the energy. And thus, this is highlighted in the program, we have the awareness and the strength to continue to eliminate all the obstacles, all the negative feelings, and our attachments. And therefore, the achievement of peace is, first of all, is not possible without a foundation. And this foundation is entering into contact with our inner being. And while we continue along this journey, we undertake this fight against our inner demons, or rather, we manage to control them and transform them. There's nothing intellectual about this. We all are aware of this, meaning that it is an inner journey. It is a direct experience. It is not an intellectual endeavor. I was very pleased to plan and collaborate with Asia and Andrea in particular in this project, that is focused on a set of key words. In particular, the aspect of kindness, on which His Holiness the Dalai Lama centers and highlights very often. This kindness also that was present in medieval culture. And even when we are in touch with our deepest self, and sometimes it is not enough to have a true attitude of peace, because the point is that this can be translated into our behavior. In the Dzogchen teaching is the key of everything. And in our behavior, peace is manifested to be altruistic and to be in listening attitude. A person who undertakes an inner journey and brings peace has an energy and peace, and this is concretized in actions of kindness, of words, ways of speaking, ways of acting, even in our everyday life. Sometimes people who appear not to undertake this journey do have this approach. I just wanted to underline this point, and in the awareness and the personal awareness that everyone, you will all talk about this. We would like to thank those present, the speakers, and Asia, and the effort that made for this project, for this event. So thank you once again, and I wish you a fruitful meeting. Thank you very much, Fabio. In short, I will say a few words on how we reached this stage, this organization, Asia, as Fabio said. It was founded in 1988, and we committed ourselves for 33 years, mainly in Tibet. And unfortunately, in 2021, the Chinese government closed our office in Tibet, and so we had to leave Tibet. At the same time, when Nankenorbu was still living, he suggested us to start working also in other countries, especially in the Himalayan area, because in a certain way, he expected the situation in Tibet not to improve. He knew it. And so he suggested us to work in all of those countries where we could actually intervene for the protection and for furthering Tibetan language and spirituality. In the past 35 years of life of this organization, we obviously focused on helping our neighbor in the third countries. We worked and we are working in Tibet, in Nepal, in India, Mongolia, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, and Bhutan. However, with the passing of years, we realized that the malaise, especially that of young people, of the children, and of the population, was growing, also in Italy, in our country. And so we started to look at Italy as a country for an intervention of our organization where it could carry out its activities. But since we did not have an expertise in terms of migrants, of the fight against poverty in Italy, we decided to focus and to bring in Italy, and maybe in the West actually, those values that we encountered in the countries where we operated. And therefore, some of these values, Fabio mentioned them, we understood that even the love towards neighbor, compassion, to a certain extent, the feeling of hope, namely, not seeing this world as a desert where beyond which there is nothing. And so we started to bring together the knowledge that we had accumulated and learned, and we asked ourselves, what can we do in school? So we started working in schools by introducing forms of Antara yoga, Tibetan yoga, in particular a form of yoga that Navgo Rinpoche had adapted to children. And immediately we saw concrete results. I mentioned, for example, my colleagues, Roberta in particular, and Linda, who follow this kind of project. They told me that once a support teacher, after a lesson of yoga for children, where there were children with disabilities, they went up to them and said, we never saw these children that were being so relaxed and with such presence so present. And so this was an encouragement for us, and we continued working with schools, also introducing courses of artwork, where, for example, our colleague Munga, a Tibetan painter, gave his contribution in with mindfulness courses, and also introducing the values of interdependence, but interdependence seen not only among human beings, but also an independent, also vis-a-vis the environment. So we started teaching in schools about the importance of transforming schools in green schools, respecting all the criteria that are necessary to respect our natural environment. Another project, and then I will conclude, it's not up to me to be the speaker here. We started also to introduce with the children the relationship between human beings and animals. What are these animals that we eat, this meat that we eat, and we don't see the suffering of these beings because we go to the supermarket, we find the little boxes and cans of tuna fish, and we don't realize there was a human being. And so what does this lead also in terms of impact on climate change? And so after the COVID, we were hoping that after the COVID, the situation of the spiritual desert ended, but then the war broke out. And so we decided, we said, let us initiate a project, and the project is let's make peace. And so we pursued this activity in schools with the children, with teachers, and now we are here because we believe that the spiritual ways of the world are one of the keys to create a more peaceful and more hopeful society that is more respectful of our neighbor and of diversity. Now, I can only but give the floor to the illustrious speakers. And so I give the floor to Diana Petech, whom I thank wholeheartedly for having immediately accepted the invitation to this conference. Just a very short summary of Diana Petech. She has a past of humanistic and musical studies, are also as musicologist, and for many years she practices the Zen Buddhist school of the School of Thich Nhat Hanh since 1994. In 2002, she entered the community Nucleo dell'Ordine dell'Interessere. In 2006, she received the transmission of the lamp, Trasmissione della Lampada. She translated many books of Thich Nhat Hanh and other masters like Dalai Lama, Kabat-Zinn, Suzuki. And now she offers to people retreats, conferences, and seminars on the practice of awareness in cooperation with the local and national Sangha. Among other things, she also participated in the foundation of the Avalokita Center, where retreats are regularly held. I give you the floor, Diana. Thank you. I wish to thank you for this invitation. It was a great honor. It's a great honor for me. As Andrea said, I have my spiritual roots in Zen, at least the roots of this long part of my life since 1994 in Zen, in the Nante current of Thich Nhat Hanh. Our master, I will be very short on this, but our master focused his entire activity on peace. This is in the last retreat he offered in Italy, in Rome, the last of a long series. And since 2012, we went to Plum Village, and since up to 2014, when he had a stroke that took him away the faculty of the speech, but not that of teaching, because he taught with his way of life and his way of being until his death last year. Peace is at the center of this tradition. And to the point that Martin Luther King, that he met in America in 1966, in 1967, candidated him to the Nobel Prize for Peace. Then he received the prize Pacem in Terris 2015, St. Francis Prize in 96. The word disarmament, the word peace was accompanied from the first moment with the spiritual life that was chosen. And this fact of sharing this experience, because I do not teach anything that was not already experienced. That is not my personal experience. I cannot transmit words. They are useless, empty words. In this act of sharing, we will be accompanied by the calligraphy. Thich Nhat Hanh had a passion for the art of calligraphy that he put into Western alphabet in French and English and in Italian at times. And so, step by step, we will be accompanied by the calligraphy of the Thai, of the master. Thai is master in Vietnamese. So, just like Master Manan Kai Norbu, of which we find a quotation at the opening of the program of this beautiful meeting. Peace in oneself, peace in the world. And as has justly been said by the previous speaker, this is the foundation of any spiritual journey towards peace. When we listen to this phrase, we say, oh, we'd hope that we would like it to be enough. And there is a widespread sense of helplessness. What is it used for? What can I do? How can I contribute? I am just a drop in the ocean. I have no not importance. I have no influence. If it were really the case, nobody would ever change anything. We have often, especially as we age, each one of us have the feeling that the world is getting worse. Things are always getting worse. Let us relax, because that was the feeling already in the 1st century after Christ. Cicero said it, o tempora moris. We're talking about approximately 2,000 years ago, so no need to worry. So the change of attitude lies in trust, one of the 5 elements of the teaching of the Buddha, and the faith in the possibility of transformation of oneself and of what surrounds us. Because we say to ourselves, what is the use of this? Nothing will change. There are always wars. And then if we extend our gaze, we see examples, de Klerk, Martin Luther King, all the righteous that contribute to save the Jews from extermination as much as they could. Pope Francis. So it's not true that there is no possibility of change. O tempora mores, that may I embody the tempora and the mores I want to see. I do my share. Everybody can do their share, but then this expands all around. like a ripple. Everything is interconnected. Let us see how. We easily divide the world into the good and the bad. I am good, the other person is bad. As a feeling, those who share my values are good, and those who don't are bad, are mean. This is a separation between me and the otherness. We usually consider ourselves a people of peace, and others are those who foment war. And they have to cultivate peace. And there is this subtle conditioning. If the others are in peace with me, I will be in peace with them. So the main challenge of a spiritual way is to not let oneself be involved in the war. I will be in peace even with those who are at war with me. This is destabilizing because it runs against an ancient habit. But we heard it also in to put down the spade in the olive grove. I will be in peace even with those who are at war with me. I will not let myself be involved in the dynamic of war, of conflict. It is not only between Palestinians and Israelis, between Russians and Ukrainians, Serbia and Kosovo in 1999 that there has been a conflict, but rather we are on a subtle line that separates conflict and peace in all our relations. In our Western culture, we see a lot of either or. Either I win or you win. And if you win, it automatically means that I lose. How many times have we seen that the relationship between two people is based on the grounds of either winning or losing? And Tai said, do you want to win or do you want to be happy? And that is just, and we tend to think that we will be happy when we win. But then when we realize that a war is triggered in a relationship, both lose because the relationship is lost. So we are used to reason in opposites. My death, your death is my life. So if we if everyone thinks if magically the life of each one of us were true, then we would realize that in our lives, at least one of us entered a situation of conflict.
In this case, it's because we don't consider the importance of interdependence, as Andrea said. Interdependence, interconnectedness is at the heart of today's debate. Think of climate change. I die if the river dies. I'll die if water cycle disappears. And it's a misinterpretation of Charles Darwin's theory. And we thought that natural evolution was based on competition, the strongest wins, the strongest tree wins, the tree that gets to the light of sun, and the other ones die because they are in the shadow. This principle is no longer valid. It's not neither or, but it's and, because cooperation is becoming an evolutional factor. Same goes for competition. Competition and cooperation, it's not an alternative. They are both together. They are both to be considered as factors. Cooperation is interconnected to competition, and we see that in big evolutional successes, for example, world dissemination. We can see these achievements related to areas where cooperation is at the center. Insects, birds, ants, plants. We discovered that plants are interconnected. It's a network. And it's true that the highest tree gets to the light, but underneath there is a nourishment happening through a network. And even the smallest trees receive sugar that is necessary for growth. Susan Semark wrote a wonderful book, The Mother Tree. She discovered that trees nourish the smallest trees through the roots. There's this nourishment that allows the small trees to develop even if they're in the shadow, not only in the same species, but there is also cooperation between species. I won't enter into details, just to say that there is a tight cooperation between different kinds of trees. For example, between the birch tree and the fir. So there is an exchange of sugar. So it's a mistake to have only one kind of tree, because if we only have one species, one type of tree, there is no cooperation. So mors tua vita mea, that's not true. I live because you live. This interdependence, this interconnectedness is a condition of being. Timatar said, it's not enough to use the word interdependence. Interbeing is the key word to be used. Interbeing. We can't be if we are not in a mutual relationship. To be is to interbe. Conflicts stem from this intertwining. I am because that is. This leads to that, this causes that. We are conditioned. In this network, we are conditioned by one another. We are influenced by one another. The first tool of inner disarmament, in my opinion, is this notion of being aware of this interest. All human beings, not only men and women, all human beings have the same needs, primary needs, food, refuge, reproduction, protection of one species, this need for security, safety, space, confirmation of one's existence, same weaknesses, same frailties, same positive aspects, and this is already a seed for inner disarmament. The other person has the same needs that I have. The other person is frail. The other person needs to be acknowledged. The other person wants to feel safe the same way that I do, that I want to feel. So, how should we cultivate inner disarmament? How can we get to inner disarmament? The starting point is this vision. We all share the same weaknesses and positive, strong aspects in the Buddhist teachings. In the Dharma text, there is an explanation. We have a consciousness, what we call the subconscious in the Western civilization. In this dimension, there are all seeds, the seeds of saint, murder, generosity, peace, satisfaction, despair, aggression. Within ourselves, there are all potential seeds. This deposit conscious has been defined, has been called the equivalent of all seeds. When there is an external event involving one seed, that seed is awake, it becomes conscious, and it is manifested in one's behaviors, actions. Very often it is an automatism. It is manifested before a conscious mind realizes that. These seeds are not planted in childhood only. These seeds are the ones that we cultivate. It's a mistake to think that when we are adults, things are determined, we can do anything. No, we are not entities. We are processes. We are work in progress up until the day we die. And this is a wonderful teaching of our master Karl Pind. He says that I am not a name, I am a germ verb, dianando.
Mi spiace per il traduttore che si arrampicherà sui muri adesso.
It's a germ verb, which means that I am a work in progress. I'm not the same person as I was 10 years ago. And I hope in 10 years I won't be the same person. This is such a great possibility for evolution. So let me ask myself, what are the seeds that I want to see manifested in my conscious, in my behaviors, in my actions? What seeds do I want to cultivate within myself and in society all around me? This is the principle of selective cultivation. All of us, in our choices, we choose a seed to cultivate and we neglect other seeds in everything that we do. For example, in a TV show we want to watch, in the conversation that I have with people, in what I read, in what we eat, in the partner that we have, friends that we have. We are all cultivating, watering seeds, one seed or the other. And the seed that we are choosing to cultivate is strengthened, grows, becomes mature. It becomes ready to be manifested in our conscious mind. And what does this mean? For example, okay, I like horror movies. I like cops movies, for example. If I water the seed of murder, if I water the seed of world separation between good and bad, if I cultivate this seed, this will bear fruits in my mind. This will be strengthened in my mind. That seed will be more mature than others. Because the seed that I'm cultivating is growing, has been growing, and If I water the seed of care, for example, for the environment, this is the notion of what we do with children. It's a training, it's a watering of the seeds. If I water the seed of non-violence, care for the environment, that seed will grow and become stronger. And it will be manifested, it will bear fruits. And it will last longer in one's consciousness. The seeds that are kept alive through our behaviors and actions are the ones that will grow, will take on space, and they will replace other seeds, the seeds of suspicion, the suspicion that someone else wants to hurt me. This is bhavana, the so-called cultivation. And there are different practices to consider. Buddha gave very specific teachings on how to water healthy seeds, how to strengthen healthy seeds. And neuroscientists today are actually confirming what I'm saying. Neuroplasticity, neural links becomes preferential. The neural pathways that we frequent more. It's like a journey, a road we are on. If we are always on the same journey, this journey becomes more familiar compared versus ancient pathways that after a while are no longer visible. It is possible to replace automatisms with this sort of cultivation that has to be patient and trustful, of course. Trust is the key word. Healthy seeds, seeds of cooperation, trust in possibilities of transformation. Peace, harmony. It's good to know that neuroplasticity 25 centuries ago had a declaration in one of the sutras, so one of the teachings attributed to Buddha, because they were transcribed after. For those, let me just quote, "O monks, frequent thoughts, frequent behaviors will become the tendency in one's mind. So if I think of suspicion, if I think of aggression, if my constant thought is about separation, that becomes the tendency, the inclination of my mind." This is what neuroplasticity is all about. So this journey is only possible if we are conscious, if we are aware of the fact that this is my mindset. So the seed of mindfulness, consciousness, I am hungry, I am suspicious. Within myself, this is what I have, this is what I feel. The difference is crucial, because if I say I am, I'm saying that I can't be anything else. If I have something within myself, it's like a cloud. Let's say, okay, I have a cloud within myself. Clouds come and go, clouds will pass. This is what I have within myself. Our freedom of choice is based on this mindfulness awareness. My mindset is triggered by an external cause, but the actual cause is not external. Once again, it's about the seeds that I have within myself. And the evidence of that is the fact that the same thing may touch me in a completely different way compared to the another person. Each person reacts according to specific seeds, not healthy seeds that are triggered, of course. We need to consider one's personal background, one's personal story, history. So mindfulness. I know I'm mindful of what I'm feeling, Satipatthana. If people feel aversion, they know what they're feeling, no commentary needed. Okay, this is what happens all the time. No, because there are thoughts, watering seeds of discomfort, despair. No, I want to fight against this person. That's it. That's the thought. This is it. Mindfulness, being mindful. So when I feel within myself the seed of war, I know that I'm ready to explode like a bomb. So what can I do? I can take a step back. I don't talk. I'm mindful of my own body and breathing. I focus to the center of myself. I realize that I am in a dangerous situation. And after I take some time, I calm myself and I realize and I try to understand whether it was an automatic behavior or it was more about an internal seed that I had within myself. It is crucial not to have any accusation. As I said, I'm not that. This is what I am now. Mindfulness is neutral, is open, is benevolent. I am mindful because I'm being benevolent toward myself and others. Very genuine mindfulness. We can all be mindfulness right here, right now. Feel your feet on the ground. Just 1 second. Relax your arms, put your arms on your legs. Sit up straight, inhale, being mindful that I am inhaling, exhaling, knowing that I am exhaling. And let us smile while breathing. I inhale and I smile. I exhale and I smile. A genuine smile, a true smile on our faces, a physical smile. I inhale and the inhaling is there, is present. I exhale and the exhaling is there, is present. I am alive. We are alive among people who wish to cultivate peace. I exhale and I smile. I'm grateful. Thank you for doing this exercise with me. And you may wonder, that's it? The answer is yes, that's it. I am aware, I am mindful of where I am, what is the context that I'm in. I am mindful that I'm alive, and that's not a guarantee. I see all the people around me. Natal people say they have this wonderful way of saying hello, I see you, and the other person responds, I am alive because of you. Many times there are conflicts because we weren't able to see the other person, or we use our hats. We use their hats to see the other person. So many times we feel hurt and we look for people who hurt us, and we say, okay, you are the reason why I feel hurt. I am right, and you are making me feel uncomfortable.
Are you sure? This is one of the great teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. It is not to sow insecurity. Are we sure that the reality that we create in our mind is the true one, or is it my inner reality that contributes to cause this feeling or to enhance it? Because punishing those who make us suffer, or that we believe make us suffer will make us suffer less. This is a delusion, still completely delusional. If he suffers, I will suffer less. No, both of us will suffer. So in terms of the harmony of the universe, this is a total defeat. It's a burning house. There is a burning house. What do I do first? Will I run after the person responsible for the arson, or will I try to extinguish the fire in my house? We decide to look for the person responsible for the arson, to punish him. In the meantime, the house is burning and the seeds of my aggressiveness become strong. We believe that the other person is against us, whereas he's just unwillingly hurt us. So we are all have the same needs, the same distractions, the same superficial act of behaving sometimes. Look, there's a foot beneath your foot. We must not take for granted that the other person knows it. No, we have to express, we have to manifest and say, look, you're hurting me, I think. And without giving automatically the other person the responsibility of my distress. Sometimes it's not a fault, it's a mistake. And there's a big difference between a fault and a mistake, because a fault, being guilty of something is intentional. But we must allow other people, we want other people to recognize our right of making a mistake, but it's hard for us to recognize the same right in other people, meaning that we don't easily recognize the possibility that they may make a mistake. We are on the defensive, but there was no reason, there was nothing we should defend ourselves from. A seed of alarm is awakened within ourselves, and we look around and we say, is there really a threat? Are you sure? Are you sure that you are in danger? A conflict on the basis, on the mere difference of opinion, because we really enjoy knowing that we're right. We have, when we discuss terribly with a person that we love, is it because we want to be right at all costs? And so the question is, do we want to win, or do we want to nourish this relationship? This way, I am sowing the seed of war between me and you. And this, well, if I realize that I'm sowing the seed of war, I have to stop. That's the only thing to do. I have to stop. I have a strong experience of this. I have a very dear friend, a sister, actually, chosen sister. And we are bound by 30 years of spiritual journeys together. And recently, we have different opinions, ever more often, strong difference of opinions. This is natural, and not necessarily one has to follow exactly the same direction. We have very lively discussions, arguments. For me, it's very clear where to stop because I don't want to lose her. I don't want to lose this relationship of a sistership, of a of love, of affection that binds us together. It's not a question of who wins, me or her. It's a relationship that is precious. And we must also clearly see when it is necessary to protect ourselves.
Faccio l'esempio di violenza domestica, con la fuga, con la denuncia, con non lasciando fare perché poi migliorerà, quindi fermando l'altro.
We cannot stop the other, we must stop the other person at the first sense of violence, clear signals, not letting the other person that it's okay that we become an object of violence. It's a right and a duty in relationships when a limit is exceeded. If we learn to see these seeds that emerge, we will better interpret our behavior and the behavior of others. I see the seed of others.
Imparo a vedere senza condanna, ma a vedere con chiarezza e quindi a vedere che cosa è abile fare.
It was necessary to see what we can do also for our own protection.
Ecco, quindi non c'è una via per la pace.
Peace. Peace is the way. Peace also means
deliberatamente, appunto, di che cosa nutrirmi. È ancora consapevolezza. Nell'insegnamento del Buddha,
the four nourishments of food, water, the impression of feelings, volition,
cioè le nostre scelte, che cosa desidero fare della mia vita,
what I want to do with my life, and the conscience.
Che traccia voglio lasciare nel mondo? Che cosa voglio che resti di me dopo che io sarò dissolto?
What will be left with me when I will be dissolved? And so, what do I want to cultivate in my field, but also in the collectivity of the common awareness, of a common consciousness? These are daily choices. What is this film cultivating in me, as I said before? What is this book cultivating in myself? I have become extremely sensitive. I resort to the right of the reader to close the book and put it aside, as Pennock used to say. I believe that it nourishes in me unhealthy seeds, a film, a conversation. Sometimes A and B are allied against C, and so there is a strong conversation between two people to demolish another, to speak badly of another, of a third person. And this foments the conflict between the two. It becomes an alliance against. We do it with an incredible ease, a triangle. In politics, the allies are those that are allied not because they have the same project, but because they are together against another person.
senza censura,
without
senza
censorship,
giudizio, che
without
cosa sta
judgment.
coltivando questa cosa? Lo
I have to
scelgo,
choose.
non
I
voglio
have to
coltivare questa
decide
cosa,
not to
l'abbandono.
cultivate this aspect. I will relinquish it because
In
it's
questo ci
harmful.
aiuta il quinto
The fifth
addestramento. Gli
point of a
addestramenti alla
training
consapevolezza
to
sono la
awareness
versione di
is
Thich
the
Nhat Hanh
version
dei
of Thich
cinque
Nhat Hanh of the 5
precetti
precepts of the
del
Buddha
Buddha
Dharma.
Dharma,
It
che
says
dice: consapevole
awareness
della
of the
sofferenza
suffering
causata da
caused
un
by
consumo
unmindful
disattento,
consumption, I
mi
am
impegno a
committed to
coltivare una
cultivating
buona
good
salute
health, both
fisica e
physical and
mentale,
mental, for
eccetera,
myself,
mangiare nel bene,
family,
eccetera.
society, by practicing
Praticherò l'osservazione
mindful
profonda del mio modo di
drinking and
assumere i quattro
consuming. I
tipi
will
di
practice looking
nutrimento:
deeply into how I
cibo
consume the
commestibile,
4 kinds of
impressioni dei
nutriments:
sensi,
edible
volizione e
foods,
coscienza. Sono
volition and
determinata
consciousness, and sense
a non
impressions. I
giocare
am determined not to
d'azzardo, a non
gamble or
assumere
to use
alcolici,
alcohol,
droghe o
drugs, or
altre
any products
sostanze
which
o
contain
stimoli che
toxins,
contengano
such as
tossine,
certain
come certi
websites,
siti internet,
electronic games,
videogiochi,
TV
programmi
programs, film,
televisivi, film,
magazines, books, and
riviste, libri e
conversations.
conversazioni.
I will practice coming
Coltiverò
back
la
to the
pratica di
present
tornare al
moment,
momento
to be in
presente
touch
per
with
stare
the
in contatto
refreshing,
con gli
healing,
elementi
and
salutari e
nourishing elements
rasserenanti,
in
risananti e
me
nutrienti che si
and
trovano in me
around me,
stesso e intorno a me,
not letting
senza lasciare
regrets
che
and
rimpianti o
sorrow drag
dispiaceri
me
mi
back into the
trascinino di nuovo
past,
nel passato,
nor letting
né che
anxiety,
ansie
fear,
o
or
paure
craving
e
pull me
avidità
out of
mi
the present
distolgano dal
moment,
momento presente,
and so on.
eccetera.
And so
E quindi sono
there are
tante
so
piccole
many
scelte
little,
deliberate di
small, deliberate
momento in
choices, moment
momento.
by
E
moment, and
questo
this
è
is
per
for the
il
present
presente e
and
per
for
il
the future.
futuro, perché se è
Because
vero
if
che il
it's true
seme
that the cultivated
coltivato si
seed becomes
rafforza e diventa
stronger,
sempre più
I
pronto,
am
io sto
cultivating
coltivando il
my
mio buon
good future
futuro
for
per
me
me e
and
per
for
tutti
all
quelli che ho
those around
intorno.
me.
Ho avuto
I
un processo di
experience a process
guarigione di
of
un'avversione verso
healing
i miei nonni
from the
paterni
aversion
che
of my
io
paternal
accusavo di aver
grandparents that I accused of
causato
having
molto
caused
danno
much harm
nell'equilibrio della mia
in the
famiglia
balance of my
nel
family in the
2000,
year
e mi
2000.
ricordo
And I
questa
remember
guarigione è
this
stato come
healing
buttare giù
was
dei
just
bagagli
letting go of heavy
pesanti.
hurdles,
Io vi
of
ho
heavy luggage. I accused
accusato
them of being
di insensibilità,
insensitive, of
di
so many
questo, di
things.
quello.
I
Vedo che
see
era il
that
meglio
it
che
was the
che
best that you
pensavate quello fosse
thought
il
it was
meglio
the
che
best that you
potevate
could
fare per
do,
noi.
they could do
Grazie,
for us.
forse
Maybe
lo
it was
voleva,
not. But
ma ora
now I
io vi
let it
lascio andare.
go.
Non sono
I am
tenuta a
not
seguire
I
la
am
vostra
not duty
eredità,
bound to follow
ma
your
dichiaro finita
legacy,
questa
but I
guarigione,
decide that this war within me is over because
perché
there's
non
no
ce n'è più
need.
bisogno,
And
ma
especially because
soprattutto
I
non
don't want
voglio
to
vivere
continue
portandomi
living,
dentro una
bringing a
guerra,
conflict, a
anche dopo
war,
molti
battle inside me,
di,
even
diciamo,
after the
destinatari della
fallen.
guerra.
This is a
Mi fa
big struggle.
fatica.
It's a
E la cosa
toil.
bella è stata
And the
che
beautiful thing is
togliendo
that
di
by
mezzo questa
eliminating the
guerra ho
war, I
cominciato a
started
vedere
to
il
see the
bello che ho
beauty that I
ereditato da
inherited from
loro,
them,
quanto di
what
bello
beauty
c'è
there was
stato
in
nella
this relationship with
relazione
them.
con loro,
And
e quindi
this
la gratitudine.
led
E
to
possiamo
gratitude.
salutare.
It
Ed è
is
un
a
bene salutare,
healthy
e
seed.
con questo
And with this, I
concludo,
conclude equanimity,
l'equanimità, l'animo
equal
equo,
soul,
non vedere
not to see
solo il
only
male,
what is
ma
evil,
vedere
but
in
to
una
see
persona
a
o in una
person or a
situazione quanto di
situation, to
buono,
see
di
how much
fertile
goodness there is
c'è, riconoscendo
by
negli altri quello che
recognizing in
desidero che gli altri
others
riconoscano a me,
what
il
I
diritto di
want them to
sbagliare,
recognize in me, the right
il
to
diritto di fare uno
do a
scivolone,
wrong, to make a
ma
mistake,
anche il
but also
bello, la
something
dote,
beautiful, the unicity.
l'unicità. L'equanimità è una delle quattro
Equanimity is one of the
dimore
4
divine,
divine
se volete,
dwellings in the
del
teachings of the Buddha.
Brahmanivara.
And an
L'animo
equal
equo è quello
soul
che
is the
guarda
one that
dall'alto. Il
looks from
termine upeksha è proprio
above,
guardare dall'alto
is
e
to look
vedere
from
tutti gli
above and to
elementi,
see
non quello
all
brutto,
the
coi paraocchi
elements,
che ti fa vedere solo quello
not
che c'è
seeing only
di
the
brutto,
negative
tra virgolette.
things. So
Ecco,
this
anche
too
questo è un
is a
seme
seed
da
to
coltivare
be
per il disarmo
cultivated for
interiore,
inner
l'animo
disarmament, an
equo.
equal soul,
Sapendo
a
che
soul
ognuno di
based
noi
on equality.
sbaglia
We know that everybody makes a
e
mistake
che se accoglie
and
con
that
equanimità anche
if
l'errore
we welcome
dell'altro,
with equanimity the mistake of the
smette
other
di
person and we
considerarlo
stop
una
considering
colpa
a
e smette di
flaw
prenderla
and we stop taking it personally, slowly, the seed of equanimity will become stronger, will bear flowers, and this is a wish. Equanimity is also the foundation to contain to curb a potential struggle. It is not a question of being blind, but rather to contain, to limit, in order to protect others, starting with benevolence, starting with a feeling of love towards others, interbeing, intertwining with others, being intertwined with others. I deliberately choose love, affection, equanimity, benevolence as the seeds I want to cultivate and manifest myself and in collective consciousness. It chooses as a trace I wish to leave in the world. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Diana, for these brief teachings on awareness, on presence. And also, I was very much impressed by this concept of cultivating seeds, because this is also an attempt of what we are trying to do, especially in schools. We have drawn inspiration from this method that His Holiness Dalai Lama is bringing in the schools of India. That is called social, ethical, and emotional learning, meaning that children are the future. They are the ones that we should help to cultivate these values of presence, of awareness, of interdependence. So these are spiritual values, to bring these spiritual values in children and in those who help the children is extremely important. So I really want to thank you, Diana. It was a great pleasure. And now we have another speaker connected on Zoom, I think. So we are waiting for him to connect. The next speaker is Luigino Bruni, professor of political economy. So we are waiting for him to connect. Unfortunately, at the last minute, he could not attend in person.
Benvenuto, professor Bruni.
Mr. Bruni, there were some problems with Zoom. There are always some technical problems, as usual. So I would like to introduce Professor Bruni, whom I want to thank for being here with us today in this conference. Professor Luigino Bruni is an economist, a historian of economic thought with a special profile of interest for civil, social, and economy of communion. He has always had a strong interest in philosophy. At the LUMSA University, he teaches political economy, coordinator of the PhD in the sciences of civil economy, is consultant of the dicastery for the laity. He writes for a contributor for Andrea Dell'Angelo and contributor of the economy of the Francesco School, author of a very long list of texts and books that it would take too much time to mention here. And so I will immediately give the floor to Professor Bruni. Thank you, Professor. Can you hear me? If you can hear me. Yes, we can hear you very well. Well, the important thing is that we can manage to hear each other. So first of all, I want to thank you for this invitation. I had decided to come to your seat in Toscana. I work relatively close, but I could not come to Rome, and so I tried to connect myself on via internet. I chose
the title of my contribution today is Spiritual Capital, an essential asset for future generations and for perpetual peace. I think this is crucial to achieve peace, and of course, starting from inner disarmament. On my daily job, I am in charge of two tasks. I'm an economics professor. In the past 10 years, I have been working on the Old Testament, the Bible, and my perspective is the lay one, the anthropological one. I have written many books, and I'll try to give you some details. Anyway, if we look at the religions in relation to peace, the overview is not really a positive one. I'm not an expert of Buddhism. I have a different background as for peace, but as for my areas of expertise, Judaism, Christianity, and of course Islam, these religions, even if they have their own vision of peace, we can deny that they have their own ideal of peace. They have peace as a community and personal goal. But if we look at history, tracing back 3,000 years, 1,500 for Islam, more or less, if we consider these factors, if we look at how religions contributed to peace, I mean, they didn't really do much. Think, for example, of what is happening in Ukraine right now. Some religious figures, some Russian religious leaders were not really in favor of peace. They were not sensitive to peace. And as for Christian religion, this notion of brotherhood, solidarity, this solidarity between religion and political power was one of the main negative factors to be considered as for a European culture, as Gerard teaches us. Let me reiterate, I'm not an expert of Buddhism. What I'm saying is from the religion that I know, the perspective that I know. I'm not skilled enough to explain the relationship between violence and Buddhism. I won't comment on that because I'm not an expert. Anyway, as René Girard teaches, religions have a relation with violence. Sacred dimension, violence, the sacred dimension, the sacrifice dimension. You know that the Latin root is sacrum facere, this notion of sacredness, this notion of divinity that needs to be tainted with blood. These experiences, these facts are archaic, and they relate to many religions of the world. When we look at the anthropological foundation of religions, we don't see peace, but we find forms of violence. And this can be seen in the language that is used in the Bible. We have this Yahweh, Yadonai, the name of God, according to the Jewish people, this word God that becomes at some point traditional God that relates to Shabbat. The God of armies, this notion. So for much time, for at least 500 years until the exile, the religion experience in the Bible is the notion according to which our God is strongest than the others. God that is warrior, peoples fighting for that God, because having God in one's war meant to be winners. The fact that Israel army didn't have an emblem that makes the difference. But when the relation between changes in the Bible, the destruction of Jerusalem temple in 587, Babylonia, this experience was devastating for the Jewish people. There is a before and an after, because Israel experienced that God could be true even if defeated. This notion was not accepted in the ancient times. God was God because God won. God could not be defeated. The true God defeated the gods of other peoples. They were defeated in Armagnac, the god warrior of Babylonians, and then there is the exile of 70 years, a devastated experience, and the truth of faith did not correspond with the truth of war. God can be true even if defeated. God is true even if it loses. This was a very important revolution as for the Bible, the greatest revolution that we see as for the Bible. This led to many very important consequences, among which God does not relate to one nation. God is the God of all, the universal character, as we read in Isaiah. Chapter 52, 55 of Isaiah, the suffering servant. Unfortunately, okay, now we got back the audio. Isaiah is like the defeated people, and his songs are from the perspective of victims. You may find these songs, I'm sure that you know these chapters from Isaiah. Weakness does not correspond to religious defeat. It's only a political defeat. It's the first lay character that we find. So these experiences are the ones of prophecy. Prophets were crucial to understand that. Prophets taught to the Jewish people a spiritual dimension that was not present before. And of course, Christianity with Jesus, they try to continue, but as you know, unfortunately today, we don't have the time to enter into details. This is my area of expertise, the civil, economical dimension, religious dimension, the European heritage was more of the Greek and Roman one. As for the Christian features, I mean, not very many, because the popular religion at the time was the Roman one, the Greek one, up until the Counter-Reformation. It was more about the religion of cities, but it was not the religion of people. Roman gods were replaced by saints, but many people didn't know. I mean, this is a very big conversation that we won't deal with today. Jesus, a certain Jesus, to say so, because there are many different forms of Jesus. There are 4 different Gospels. We have the depiction of Jesus according to the letters of the apostles. We have Jesus described by the apocryphal Gospels, and then we have the mainstream depiction of Jesus. We have the prophet Jesus proclaiming the kingdom of God, the Son of God, what we read in Daniel, Ezekiel, the Son of Man who comes and is a peaceful one. He doesn't have a sword. He doesn't have a spear. He's proclaiming a kingdom of peace and love. Jesus is put on a cross. He doesn't want to be put on a cross, as we all know, according to the most recent theology, biblical studies. They all agree that Jesus didn't think of dying on the cross. It was not his intention. He was surprised by that, because his intention was to proclaim a kingdom of love, and died in old age, natural death. At some point, he realized that his message was against the political message of the Romans. He realized that very clearly after the death of John the Baptist. He realized that the history was complicated, was becoming complicated, and the death on the cross is a different problem to consider. Death is interpreted as a sacrifice. This is one of the main issues in theology. Sacrifice of home for home of the Father, of the Son, the Father who does something that we never do for our children. This reading, this interpretation was not useful to create a peaceful religion, because think of the Crusades, this bloody notion according to which sins are removed through bloodshedding. And of course, this notion is not present in the Gospels. In the Gospels, we don't have this interpretation. So it's very interesting to analyze this notion of bloody sacrifice as necessary for salvation. Martyrs. In the Middle Ages, the religion became a religion of cross, of blood, and now I'm focusing on Counter-Reformation, and this theme of blood is at the center. Think of the end of the 1600s, think of the religion present in monasteries, among people. It's a religion of sacrifice without Sunday. I mean, it's a religion of sacrifices. Tears, the source of Mary. It's a religion based on based on a theology of atonement. Without pain, unfortunately, sometimes we can't hear the audio of the speaker. Resurrection is, we have paradise, but on earth we feel pain, but we have to welcome pain if we want to save ourselves and others. It's a market of indulgence that is present in the Counter-Reformation. I wrote an article published in the Avvenire magazine, an article about what happened in the monasteries during the Counter-Reformation in Italy. Nuns were invited by their professors to suffer, and the more they suffer, they didn't eat penitence, the more they suffer, the more souls they saved in purgatory. It was like a market. I suffer on earth and I can save people who died. This led to a religion that did not promote inner peace and external peace, a religion putting at its center a cruel notion of life, cross, blood, thorns. It was not a humanism. This was controversial. I had some conversations with my fellow Christian expert. I'm an historian, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a priest. When I published this article on Avvenire, which is a magazine of the Bishop Conference, some of the bishops got offended because they told me that these were notions that we all study. With the Counter-Reformation, we had a dishumanism, which is to say, in order to underline the greatness of God, I have to lower man. John of the Cross, the 19th century theology. The more I suffer, I mean, you are everything, I am nothing. This theory of nothingness, it is very interesting to relate that to Buddhism, because this notion of nothing that can be a road to everything, but there is a nothing that leads to more nothing. And people who suffer, people who always suffer and resurrection never comes. There is an invitation to find different crosses, an invitation to find nothingness. I am nothing, you are everything. In order to have a great God, we lowered men, especially women. Women before, they were the ones who needed to suffer. Men could sin, and women had to suffer. So what I'm trying to say, what about religions and peace now? This is the main theme for me today. Inner disarmament, the theme you are working on, is of course a very important theme that also concerns the external disarmament. Think, for example, of the Catholic religion. If we have joy and happiness considered as temptations, as problems, it's difficult to see social relationships as positive, as bringers of harmony, because this vision of God becomes vision of man. We all know that there is a theology behind each humanism. If we have a father putting his son on the cross, if we have a God asking us to suffer, this won't lead to harmony and peace. And we saw what happened in Europe. There were many conflicts, wars among Christian Catholic peoples. And we saw a struggle for peace, despite the fact that Jesus and Saint Paul proclaimed peace, love, harmony, beatitudes, blessed are those who work for peace. So what about today? What is how do religion what do religions can do now for peace? Do religions foment war even if they don't want to? I think we need purification of religions. We need to purify religions from the war factors, purification of memory, texts. Not all the words of descriptions need to be remembered. There are words of love, positive words that are in favor of men and women that need to be remembered, ancient ones that need to be forgotten, not because they're bad, but because they had a function, they had a role in their times, maybe it was good, but now they are no longer significant, they don't have a role anymore. We can't have this relation with scriptures, the same that we had before, that all scriptures were words of God, Psalm, all psalms have the same value. No, we have to make a distinction, what we want to save and what we want to bring with us in the new century and what we want to leave behind. We need to have a lay relation with scriptures. Scriptures, yes, there are some that bring life and there are some that bring death. Scriptures that sometimes help or sometimes do not help human cohabitation. Now, let me conclude because I'm running out of time. I think I have been talking for more than 20 minutes. How long do I have?
Pronto?
Fino alle 11:15.
Però facciamo un po' di dialogo anche? No?
Se lei non si può fermare, le domande gliele facciamo subito dopo, se no ci sarebbe un tempo.
Yes, unfortunately, I can't stay today. I'm not home. Okay, yes, of course. So we'll ask you questions after your conclusion. Yes, I apologize. I don't have the time. But if you want, we can have a dialogue, Q&A. I have 20 minutes. Yes. Great. Okay. Let me just conclude by saying that a very important theme to me, I'm also a promoter of the Economy of Francescan initiative launched by Pope Francis that relates to Saint Francis of Assisi, Pope Francis. It's a movement of young economists all around the world working for an economy of peace. We held a meeting in Assisi in 2022 with the Pope. We invited many young people. We talked about peace, the war in Ukraine. Saint Francis is also a saint of peace. And this year with young people, we are working on spiritual capital, this notion of spiritual capital. Spiritual codes of the main religions, at least the ones that I know. I'm not very an expert of Buddhism. The codes, the languages of the main European religions are a few. I mean, Judaism, Christianity, different forms. Young people, the contemporary world, they don't understand the language that is used today by the main religions. There is not a bridge among young people and religions. Think of Gospels, dogmas, Christian dogmas that are not understood by young people. This inheritance coming from theology, Greek, Middle Ages philosophies, it's no longer understood today. If today we take, let's say, an experiment, 500 young people, a target group aged between 18 and 30 years in Italy, in France, in Germany, choose the country that you want. And we tell this group of people about the Bible, Christianity. I mean, they would understand, let's say, 5%. There is no clear communication. And why? Let me tell you my opinion. The reason is very simple. Christianity took on a mythical version of a religion. What do I mean by that? When in the 1600, after the Reformation, they tried to spread the message among people, countryside, the new orders of Jesuits, mass evangelization. They found a pagan world. Think of the Jesuit tales. Italy was considered as the new India because they were considered wild people to evangelize the same way Matteo Ricci was evangelizing India.
Allora, diciamo, trovando... Scusate che devo mettere in carica il telefono perché mi si sta scaricando. Mi è arrivato un messaggio che c'è poca...
I received a message that I'm low, my battery is low. So the speaker just said.
Fatto. Scusate perché definitivamente parlavo.
Okay, so speaker apologizes for the technical problem. So when the Catholics, priests, Jesuits, various parishes and bishops evangelized the masses, they found this new India, pagan peoples that worshipped earth, trees, all the ancient rites as we were taught by Ernesto Di Martino, where they worship the crops, the fruitfulness of the crops, the picking of the grapes, and so on. However, instead of saying, look, these things, the earth, the crops, the marriage between trees, the various protectors or demons of specific places, and the small deities in the homes are nice things, but it's folklore. These are family histories. Christianity is something else. It's not simply the new name of domestic deities. The church baptized all of this magic, mystical world that was already present. Saint Anthony, Saint Biagio, and the Holy Virgin that became the female deity that already existed in the countries. So clearly, this Christianity did not withstand the impact with post-modernity because it ended up as a myth that my grandchildren put in the grotto of Santa Claus. They put Barbie and Ken because they make confuse things. And all of this clashed against the world of science, psychoanalysis. It collapsed because the myth ended. So, how can we give spiritual capital to the young generations? Without spirituality, life is empty. If you fail an exam, they fail an exam in university and they get depressed. If you don't have a spiritual resilience to face the challenges of life, an interiority, how can you manage the various phases, a grandparent that passes away, diseases, uncertainties, the next COVID, for example, or vice versa, next pandemic, will be a mass depression. We'll start with young people and then we'll go upwards, because the meaning of life is not given by work, by technology, or by social networks, by social media. So what do we do? Because the spiritual patrimony was given in the past by popular piety, by prayer, education you received also in schools. Everything was imbibed with this religious capital, spiritual capital of civil values, the capacity of going in depth and finding meaning. Maybe sometimes they were not very deep elements that we found, but they were there, and this led to the creation of the factories and the economy. It gave workers in factories that were able of withstanding the frustration and defeats, and it led to the civilization that we know. So how can we recreate a spiritual capital in a world that is post-traditional religious traditions? I believe that we should do something similar to what Christianity did with the ancient Roman world. Christianity took what was already present in that world and installed, remember the church of Siracusa or the city of Ascoli, on the Donic temple, Roman temple, they placed the church. Some columns, some rocks that were already there were the foundation of a new history. And so as Christianity did with the ancient Roman world, this should be done in Europe. This is being done in Europe with the Christian world. If we imagine that in the future we cannot merely cherish what will remain of Christianity. This will involve only 1% of Italians in the next century. This is not a spiritual capital. It will be a capital of consumers, of people who are interested in ancient relics. So this spiritual capital, require the contribution of all religious humanisms, although they are going through a crisis. They are still thriving, but should not defend themselves looking at the past, but looking at the future. If we want to be a gift, a common good for today's humanity, we must ensure that people understand this. We cannot continue saying things with a medieval language in the case of Christianity, because the spiritual capital is a civil capital, it's not a religious thing. Without spirituality, you cannot live, because life is made also of these things. So this is the challenge we are working on, we are facing, and how can we restart to recreate a spiritual capital that is huge? Today we are not only facing the lack of relational capital, of social capital. First of all, we are lacking the spiritual resilience of the young, in particular, on the part of the young in particular. So this is an element that we may take note of in my intervention. I will stop here and leave some space for dialogue. Thank you for listening. You see, my shirt here represents a green of hope, color green of hope. I thank wholeheartedly Professor Bruni for this very interesting analysis, and I'm told there are some questions. Unfortunately, I cannot hear you. I hear there is a sound from the room, but I don't understand the words. Let's see if you can hear me in this way. Just a moment, we will see whether we can. Can you hear me, Professor? Very slightly. Not very well. If I make an effort, you make an effort, maybe. And there are 4 or 5 questions from Zoom. I don't know whether there were questions also from the hall. So let us start from here and then we go on to Zoom. Thank you. My name is Mustafa Roma from the Islamic Religious Community. I thank you, Professor. Can you hear me? More or less. There will be a microphone. Yes, I have a microphone. I want to thank you.
Due piccole provocazioni
And
per
just
interagire. La prima
two
era
provocations.
rispetto al rischio dell'ingenuità, ecco, nel senso
Well,
che la
at risk
prospettiva
of
di
seeming
andare a
naive, the
rimuovere queste
perspective of
parti
removing
di quella che per me, chiamo nel mio linguaggio, come dire, la rivelazione,
the language,
può avere
talking about, for example, and
non ha
revelation, this is not
necessariamente l'effetto, non
necessarily,
produce
does not
necessariamente l'effetto di
necessarily produce the
purificare
effect of
l'umanità
purifying
da alcuni
humanity
elementi
from
che le
some
sono propri,
elements
come
that
anche il
pertain to it,
male
like
o la violenza.
evil or
Mentre
violence.
invece mi trovo molto
Whereas I
d'accordo con
perfectly
l'idea di
agree
dover
with the
rinnovare la
idea
lettura,
of
rinnovare
renewing
l'interpretazione,
interpretation, of
rinnovare la
renewing the
trasmissione di una
transmission
spiritualità, ma
of
io non riesco a
spirituality.
capirla a 360 gradi, ecco, anche proprio per tendere verso un bene.
So
Mentre non
I
vorrei, ecco, mi sentirei di mettere un
would
attimo un
like
campanello
to
di
put
attenzione
an alarm
sulla
bell on the
prospettiva di
prospect
costruire,
of
come dire, in modo solo
the
razionale
creating
una
in an only
spiritualità,
rational manner a
nel senso che
spirituality,
ci vedo, sì, forse un
meaning that
successo
I see a
mondano, nel senso di
mundane
poter raggiungere più
success in
persone,
terms of
ma
adding
bisogna
more people,
equilibrare
but
questo
this dialogue should
dialogo
be
che è sempre
balanced. It is
necessario tra le
always
persone,
necessary
tra la
between
civiltà,
persons, between
e se contempla
civilization.
anche un elemento
If a
religioso,
religious element is
con un
contemplated
rapporto
with a
che non è,
relationship
come
that is
dire,
not
naturalmente
naturally to be
scontato
taken for
con la
granted
verità,
with the
che non deve
truth,
essere
that
naturalmente
should not be
strumentalizzata, ma
manipulated,
deve
but
provare a essere
should
messa al
try to be
servizio di
put at the
questa
service of
crescita della
this
civiltà e
growth
non
of
può essere, come dire,
civilization, should not be
arbitrariamente gestita, credo,
arbitrarily managed by an elite
per
group,
quanto ben
however
intenzionata.
well-intentioned.
Grazie.
Magari ascoltiamo anche gli
Okay, let
altri.
us take also the questions.
Non le leggo le cose
I
su Zoom,
cannot read
soltanto
anything
sugli
on
altri.
Zoom.
Le leggiamo noi.
And we can read
Allora.
it.
Interessante il suo
So,
discorso sull'abbandonare alcune
what you
parole
said
obsolete o
on
fuorvianti.
abandoning
Ma come lavorare
misleading
su
words is
questo?
interesting. How can we
Penso
work
come
on
un
that? I
ragazzo o
think of how the
ragazza che
way in
ascolta
which
una
a
lettura
boy
la
or girl
domenica.
who listens
Come
to the
possiamo
Sunday
noi
reading as
laici
a lady, how
lavorare
can we
affinché la
work
Chiesa
so that the
comprenda
church
che occorre
understands that it is
cambiare,
necessarily
trasformarsi e stare
to
nel
change, be
presente?
transformed, and remain in the present moment?
Questa è
This is
una
a
domanda.
question. Another?
Altra. Quanto pensa che abbia
To
influito
what extent do you
l'interpretazione
think that the
punitiva
punitive
del
interpretation of
cristianesimo
Christianity
nello spostare tante
affected
persone dal mondo
the
occidentale
the
verso
fact that
religioni
many
altre,
Westerners
tra virgolette, come ad
approached
esempio il
other
buddismo?
religions like Buddhism?
Ultima
Last
domanda.
question.
Come ha fatto
How
un
has
Dio
a
che è a
God
capo
that
di un
was at the
esercito che
lead
uccideva
of an
migliaia di
army that killed
persone,
millions of
faceva ecatombe
people
di
and caused
animali,
a
che
genocide of
permette
animals,
di
that
mettere in croce il
enables
figlio,
to
è diventato
crucify
un
his son,
Dio?
became
È
God?
in capital letter, come si dice, stampatello.
Thank
Grazie.
you.
Grazie a lei. Ma io non ho capito benissimo.
I did not
credo io
understand
come
very
tutti
well
dal punto di
because there were,
vista
in fact, some just
di
technical
dobbiamo
problems,
sopportare per
unfortunately.
bene. Comunque, diciamo,
However,
da quei brani di domanda che sono riuscito a intercettare
some questions that I
primo signore
understood
che parlava
in
di
presence,
capito
if
bene
I
che
well
era
understand it,
pericoloso
it's a
andare a
bit
purificare
dangerous to
le
purify
religioni, le scritture
religions and the
sacre
holy
da
scriptures
cose che
from
non
the
ci
things
piacciono.
that we don't like, we don't appreciate, we cannot eliminate scripture.
Cosa che io, diciamo,
Things
mentre
that I
capisco e
obviously
condivido,
understand and I
10
share
anni
for
che
the
commento
past 10 years.
l'Antico
I've
Testamento,
been
lavoro su questo, ora sto
I've done
commentando
exegesis of
un po'
the Old
di sapienza
Testament,
che
of the New
acquisisco
Testament. I'm working on the
situazione.
Gospels of
Però ora non è
Luke
tanto il
right now.
discorso
However, there's
di
not so
andare
much
indietro a dire questo salviamo,
the
questo
fact
no,
of
perché non
keeping
ha
what you have to
senso nel
keep and what you
prossimo, anche
must
perché la Bibbia
discard, because
è un testo
Bible is a
stupendo dal punto di
beautiful
vista
text,
letterario, non è che
even
possiamo
from a
fare
literary
come
perspective,
nei momenti
that we
di
can read.
oscurantismo dove si
We cannot
buttavano
act like it dark
fare
moments of history when
correlazioni
they were set on
nel
fire, or
secondo
like
secolo, questo
in the second
teologo,
century,
insomma, che
a
voleva
theologian
eliminare tutto l'Antico Testamento
that
e
wanted to
salvare soltanto
burn
il
the Old
Vangelo,
Testament
Coleri
and
suo,
save
il Vangelo di
only
Marcione, quella
one
versione del Vangelo di Luca, seconda
gospel
lettera di Paolo,
that
in cui lui
was
diceva che l'Antico
the
Testamento non serviva a
gospel
niente e
of Marcione. And he said that should be eliminated from Christianity. Said a God that dies on the cross, then another one is born. So the church said it was a heresy, and he brought with him Jeremiah, Isaiah, and so on. So this makes us understand that we must not fall into the mistake that was made by the destroyers of the Library of Alexandria on the basis of this theory in the Library of Alexandria, and it was also in line with the Quran. But if one was not in line, it had to be destroyed. These visions, unfortunately, not only complicated lives of everyone, but I commented everything, the Old Testament, all the Psalms. Also, there are some things we might disagree with, but they're part of it. But the problem is, what will we do with this amount of writings? What use do we make of those passages, of those ancient visions that are violent? We want to give it the same weight we give to the Beatitudes. This is the point. Every generation should decide what to do with this legacy. It's not all the same. On which aspect of biblical humanism do we want to develop? We thank them, and then we put it in the library for the scholars, but we will not teach it to children, and will not use it during our liturgy. So this is what to say. Not all the past should be saved. This naive idea of saying that a promised land is right around the corner. Well, no, behind it there are the rivers of Babylon. There is a Nile River, slavery, the Jordan River is beyond. And it's interesting that this symbolic episode of Moses, a great liberator of the Nile, does not enter the promised land. That's to say that the promised land is not a good to be possessed, but it is a desire to be cherished, to be cultivated. If you reach it, it's no longer promised land, it's an illusion. Life is a constant pension for something. It's never full achievement. You work towards a goal. Like the Jews at the days of the wedding, the spouse breaks a glass, a vase, a glass, to say that life is not complete. Even when they build a new home, they leave a piece of the wall of the concrete is not incomplete. Just to say, nothing is over complete. It's always a work in progress. The non-fulfillment of life as a value, not as a hindrance. So, in the first turn of a century, there were an element. I believe that the parables, only the first are the prodigal son, the good Samaritan, are not historically being said by Jesus. They're beautiful, but I'm not really interested whether Jesus said it or not. So this is what we do today. So, according to the second theme that was raised, what can we do as laity? I wrote an editorial on Familia Cristiana that will be published soon, to distinguish the church between the clerics and laity. We are surrounded by an impressive amount of clericalism. The first thing that we have to overcome today is the distinguishment between laity and non-laity. Was Jesus a cleric or was he a layperson? Because laity is a dimension of the people, not of those who is not consecrated. I don't appreciate the word layperson because it is a clerical perspective, a way of distinguishing categories. I prefer Paul's vision of charisms. Each has a name for the common, has a gift, and all of these gifts are the same. It's not that the gift is that of the cleric and all the others are not. So as the laypersons, we can talk about this, to have a laity without having a dogmatic approach to the faith, meaning that nothing is perfect, nothing is unmovable, because clericalism is not a problem of the priests, it's an anthropological problem. The political world is a clericalism. When a certain elite group defines itself as aristocratic on the basis of a sacred principle, and therefore it places itself above everyone else. This is done by the priests, but also by the laity. So we should react with all forms of clericalism. Well, certainly, extending our gaze to other religions. I believe this is always fascinating in terms of what we know of Buddhism. So I recently had various meetings with the Buddhism, recently also in France, and I always heard perceived a special harmony. If you are in your tea that you are drinking, in that tea there is everything, all your attention in that cup while you are turning the sugar in the tea with your spoon, everything is there, the infinite is there. The idea that you plunge into that moment, and in that moment you touch this dimension that is very similar to traditional monasticism. Why was this fascination of monasticism? Because liturgical time is an eternal time. When you enter the liturgy, you enter paradise, because you leave chronos for kairos. The quantitative dimension of time is replaced by the quality. So that the great intention of monasticism was eternal life, changing the logic of time. Present is a void that connects you to the infinite. I think they're beautiful things. I don't know them, but I believe there are some living dimensions in all the religions, because ultimately, what is it according to a serious religion? Christianity. It says, if you are in this humanism that has thousands of years of seriousness of tests, I tell you something, I give you a guarantee. You are not speaking with an idol, but with yourself. You are not deceiving yourselves.
C'è una sorta di assicurazione contro la vanitas, contro le cavolate, di cui è pieno il mondo del fai da te.
So this humanism is various thousands of years old, and within this humanism, the world God is pronounced.
Non stai parlando, non ti stai illudendo. Non è soltanto una grande illusione. Ci può essere una dimensione di illusione, perché
there could be a sense of delusion, because all the religions are threatened by a sense of delusions. Everybody, we all have illusions, of course. We always live on the threshold of a precipice. But there is a nucleus that is not vanitas.
Questa è la grande promessa, che non ti possono fare le religioni che nascono ieri, l'altro ieri, di questi santoni o di questa gente che si inventa una religione semplicemente. Poi oggi non parliamo di quelle che nascono a scopo di lucro.
The non-profit, all the religions of health, there is a huge world that we don't see. The last point, also the theme of the cross, that is sacrifice. I am working on this because it's a theme that is very dear to me. I will write a small pamphlet on the theme of sacrifice. So what is the point? A certain theology shared with the Jews that has a certain importance. We believe it belonged to Paul until 100 years ago. Some phrases of Paul himself read the passion, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus within the economic paradigm. there was a price to be paid because God the Father had to forgive humanity that was a sinner. And since sin was infinite, only an infinite price could pay that debt. Who has an infinite price? God himself. And so the Son of God was the only one who could pay this price to the Father. And so the Christ was the price in blood that was paid by a man, and not only a man, but God was an economic trinity, something that happens within the Trinity for a reason of salvation. It did not change the Trinity in itself, but how Trinity expressed itself in history. The economy of salvation, even this word, this term, economy, is interesting. Only a son could pay such a high price. And so we saw the idea that the cross was the price of sacrifice that in a certain way brings together all the sacrifices of the Old Testament. We don't need to sacrifice others because the Son paid for all. This, unfortunately, we see also in Paul, the price of salvation, but the theology of this history tells us there is Paul. Then we saw this very strongly in the Middle Ages, satisfactio, so-called, meaning that God wanted to be satisfied and only the Son could satisfy him. And then with the Counter-Reformation, it exploded because since Luther, and justly so, criticized Mass as sacrifice, because sacrifice is one done once and for all. But Luther spoke about the Last Supper so Catholics, in order to define their identity compared to the Protestants, reiterated Mass and the sacrifice. And so sacrifice returned to be at the center. And so we resume this idea when you try to explain it today anthropologically to someone who the Godfather who wanted the Son on the cross and his blood to purify us. Unfortunately, this God is worse than us. So the parents must take away the sons from the cross. We all know this.
And this is not conceivable from the anthropological perspective. So Jesus accepting to be put on the cross, paying a price to the Father, it's a theological perversion that unfortunately we have built throughout the years. Now the majority of theologians does not agree, but the practice, the pastoral of sacrifice is still very well rooted in the Christian world, and let's hope to overcome it one day. My time is over. I'm really grateful to all of you for giving me the floor. A big thank you to Professor Bruni. I hope we'll meet again in person. Now, just a very quick comment. Professor Bruni, there are 5 questions from the online audience, but unfortunately, okay, he disappeared. He had to go. Okay, now we have a 10-minute break.